The world, especially Europe, has only one agenda recently: climate change and drought. Bob Ward, Policy Director at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and Environment at the London School of Economics, is with us. Mr. Ward, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
I would like to ask, rivers are drying up. Half of Europe is threatened by drought. What's happening there?
Well, we've had a combination of very high temperatures over an extended period this summer in Europe, which is increased evaporation rates of water. But we've also had low levels of rainfall at the same time. I've seen some researchers suggest that Europe might be facing a drought it hasn't seen for 500 years. That combination of a lack of rainfall and high temperatures mean that we've got some rather extreme drought conditions across Europe. Rivers are drying up, crops are dying. It's leading to water shortages in some places. There's a very serious situation. It's not one that can be fixed quickly because it's the levels of rivers and reservoirs have gone right down, and it will take several weeks of rain to restore those.
United Nations calls for a net zero target, which means cutting greenhouse gas emissions to as close to zero as possible. Do you think it is possible to reach this goal by 2050?
Well, it is possible to reach it by 2050, and it's very important that we do, because the impacts of climate change continue to grow until the world gets to zero emissions, and we will see increasing impacts such as periods of dryness and high temperatures. They're going to increase in intensity and frequency until we get to net zero emissions. So we're going to have to, and I think it will be challenging, but it's certainly feasible.
Regarding climate change, you said previously that you ain't seen nothing yet. Why do you think so?
The impacts of climate change are growing all the time. As long as greenhouse gas concentrations go up in the atmosphere, then the impacts grow. They will continue to grow until the world effectively stops emitting greenhouse gases. And the earliest date that countries are talking about for reaching net zero globally is 2050. So for the next 30 years, things are going to get worse. And that's why we may think it's bad at the moment, but we really ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to get much worse.
You implied that the situation will have even more devastating effects.
Yeah, we're seeing impacts of climate change all around the world, are all happening at the same time and putting great stress on countries. Not only is it through the direct impacts of dealing with more frequent and intense heat waves, periods of both extended dryness, but also heavy rainfall, intense rainfall that can cause flooding, rising sea levels that are leading to coastal flooding. But it's also going to interfere with our global systems, such as food supplies, that if you start getting major impacts on big food growing regions in the world, then that's going to have widespread impact. So I'm afraid we're going to have to get used to dealing with this. It's going to get worse for the next 30 years. We're going to have to become more resilient, but we also need to really strongly increase our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to stop it getting even worse in the second half of this century and going beyond a point where we can really cope. And we will see widespread impacts on lives and livelihoods, the potential for a lot of people to die, lose their jobs, large population displacements, and potential conflict and war. That's what will happen if we do not successfully tackle our greenhouse gas emissions.
Bob Ward, thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.